Hello, everyone. Thank you for unmuting me. Yeah.
Okay.
To answer to your question, I think most of the people at my level didn't really think too much about, the soil on the surface. It was subsurface that we were mostly dealing with. That was, which made it so interesting because you could never see it in its entirety. It came to the surface in pieces, and only the geologists could look at it and kind of help us and tell us what we were dealing with in drilling.
So what would so I guess for me, I don't know what it's like drilling. Do you go out into so a geologist? The process is a geologist will tell you where to drill, and then you must go to some very remote areas, and then with all your equipment, and so you have different types of wells to drill. And I'm just wondering what you saw, what kind of wells are drilled, what goes into those wells, what you saw come out of them. That's a lot of questions, but just to sort of give us a sense of what is it like right there when you're doing it?
It would depend where you were in developing fields. It wasn't so remote. There are some fields like here in Los Angeles that are in the city. But yes, there are several. One of the most unknown is it's the San Vicente drill site, and it's between Cedars-Sinai Hospital and the Beverly Center, which is a very upscale shopping center. And it's at the corner of La Cienega and San Vicente Boulevard in Los Angeles. And there are 60 producing wells there. So, and they were started in the 50s, but the city's grown up around it. So there's the two difference of urban drilling and then drilling in Wyoming, Montana, and Alaska, places that are remote. Each place had I think the most challenging were the city drilling in the cities were horrifying with the amount of traffic and humans that you had to deal with. It was much more fun to deal with the animals and the bears. So
to an extent,
it was easier to deal with on my end. And the types of wells were either production wells or injection wells that they injected wastewater back into the formations to extract more oil from the producing sands.
So wastewater, what is in wastewater?
I couldn't actually tell you chemically, but it's oil is the oil comes to surface with water from whatever depth you're producing from, and it's separated at the surface, and then it has to be dealt with. So typically, after they separate the oil from the water is injected back into the earth at approximately the depth of the producing formation.
So does the water go back into the same well, or is it a separate well?
Oh no, different well. An injection well is an injection well that you would put the fluid back into the earth, where the producing wells they're either an oil producing well or a gas producing well.
So I'm just curious about what that does to the water table. I don't know if you can answer that, but does it go back into the water table, or?
The water table is typically at 500 feet, maybe surface water. The water table, this water is not potable water, and you couldn't use it as irrigation unless you refined it, and of course they don't want to spend any money refining anything that they're not going to turn into a fuel or something that they can profit from.
Right. So I should have asked you how deep the wells are versus just a well I drill on my property for water.
All of that depends where you are and where the production is. I think the shallowest well to produce oil that I ever drilled was in the Bakersfield area, and it was about 500 feet deep. So that's really shallow.
Shallow.
And I think in Pennsylvania, some of the oil wells there were in the 500-foot range. And so your water would maybe be at 100, 200, 300 feet, something like that.
So what happens, I guess, what happens over time with wells? Do you have to go back and maintain them, or?
Absolutely, yeah.
So what's involved with maintaining them, and do wells get are they always maintained, or what happens to the land if underneath the subsoil, underneath the deep soil?
The deep soil, I don't think is so affected as the surface soil in producing wells. The soil is typically contaminated in the immediate vicinity of an oil well, say a radius of 20, 30 yards maybe, where they, yes, it's quite a footprint, no matter what you read or what they try to tell you. It's, they spill oil and whatever when they work on the wells, and it's not a clean operation. Very few, I think maybe in Europe, they're much more advanced than we are. And a huge problem here in California are idle wells that have been drilled that are no longer producing, that need to be abandoned. And the small oil companies or large oil companies that sold off those properties, the small companies are now no longer in business. And I don't know the actual number, but it's really a large number of wells in California that need to be abandoned, that it really has no effect on the deep where the production zone is. It's just in the area around the wells that
like that supermarket in the hospital that you were mentioning.
Absolutely. Well, those areas are all paved. It's like a city street. So there, except in that small footprint, I think they would be less polluted than, say, there's a very large oil field between that area and Los Angeles International Airport, which is an old oil field. It's very large. What is it called? It's called the Baldwin Hills oil field. And it's been producing since the early 1900s. And is still producing today.
Hey, Robert, I had a question about those urban wells that you helped develop. Was there any time that you worked on an oil well that was like publicly owned? I assume that most of the work you did was for wells that were owned by the company that you worked for, but it just made me consider that maybe there are instances of some oil wells being publicly owned, or did you never experience that?
I never experienced a well that was publicly owned. They were all owned by either a large oil company or a independent oil company.
Cool. That's what I figured. It just was interesting to think of such a commonly used space, and having the resources being extracted by one entity. But cool, thanks.
You're welcome.
I have a couple more questions. One is, was there a difference? Well, what's happened over the last, like in your lifetime of doing drilling to make things safer or cleaner? And the other part of this is there a difference in the way people drill in the United States versus say Central Africa?
Oh, yes. and yes, in the Middle East as well. The first question, I think domestically in the United States, there has been a huge change in safety, personal safety for the people who work there, which is a good thing. And also the environmentally, how wells are drilled here, and the effort to reduce pollution and reduce the footprint. When I started in 1970 in Ventura County in California, the common way to drill a well was you would move the equipment in, and then you would drill a large pit, probably half the size of a football field and maybe 10 feet deep. And all of the cuttings and everything that you did on that well went into that pit. And it was very large. And at the end, it was left to dry out or then covered up.
Wow.
Yes, and then in some places in California, they abandoned wells that were closer to the city and built homes on top of those things that they covered up, and they never really completely dried it was like mud underneath it. So the homes then cracked and shifted. And this was in where was Richard Nixon from? It was in the Orange County area. And they had to have people move out of the homes and demolish the homes and repair their mistakes. But now all in California, they don't put things in pits. They put them in steel containers, and they deal with the cuttings as they're brought to the surface. So it's a much cleaner operation. But then again, as far as say the Gulf of Mexico, what happened there a few years ago with the Deepwater Horizon, some parts of our industry is still ruled by the macho man image, and that the ignoring of the dangers of an oil well or a gas well, as I think everyone saw with that blowout, which was caused by human error.